The movie begins with Lex Luthor telling Mercy, his personal bodyguard, that the more popular Superman gets, the more people dismiss his presence, which is why he's created a new satellite called Lex 9000. This satellite has the power to orbit Earth 24 times a day and protect everyone from any incoming dangers. Meanwhile, in Lex Labs, scientists notice an asteroid headed towards Earth. Out in space, the asteroid turns right, causing the satellite to miss hitting it, and it heads straight for Earth. When the scientists try to pinpoint where it's going to land, they find that it is headed for Lex Labs. Just as everyone starts evacuating the lab, the asteroid lands in front of them. A robot emerges out of the asteroid and heads for the lab. Back in the metropolis at the Daily Planet, Perry, the chief editor, announces that Brainiac has attacked Lex Labs. As soon as Lois Lane hears about this, she takes her cameraman Jimmy Olsen and rushes to Lex Labs to get the first scoop. Clark Kent, who had been listening to Lois, immediately changes into his Superman suit and flies towards the lab. There, he finds Brainiac using the information and feeding it into his system. Just as he tells Brainiac to stop, Brainiac uses the information that he had gathered and activates a missile. This diverts Superman's attention as he rushes to prevent the missile from hitting anyone in the city. At the last second, though, he manages to divert it towards the ocean. He then flies back to Lex Labs, where Brainiac had completed the upload and taken all of the data from the lab's computers. Just as Superman attacks Brainiac, he uses his power and activates Lex 9000. The satellite aims at Superman and uses a powerful beam to pin him down. At the same time, Lex is informed about Brainiac and drives along with Mercy to Lex Labs. He watches as Brainiac uses his invention to take Superman down. During this time, Brainiac activates more missiles that hit Superman and slow him down. Meanwhile, Lois reaches Lex Labs as well. She climbs up an electricity tower and watches as the two of them fight. Jimmy tries warning her and tells her that she might get into trouble again, but she brushes off his concerns. Brainiac continues attacking Superman, not giving him a chance to fight back. Pinned down by the Lex 9000 beam, Superman blows super breath and freezes Brainiac. This is when he notices that one of the missiles had hit the tower that Lois was on and she was about to fall. He flies towards her and manages to save her at the last moment. At the same time, Lex explores his destroyed lab. He notices a chip that was serving as the brain of Brainiac and picks it up. Just as Superman lands near him, he hides the chip in his pocket. He makes small talk with Superman and Lois and tells them that he had only built the machine and did not know that it would be used by their enemies. Then he leaves after bidding the group goodbye. Once Clark returns to the Daily Planet, Perry asks him to become a foreign correspondent for them. However, he rejects the offer and decides to go back to Smallville to visit his parents. He tells them that he thinks that Lois might be onto him and he's scared that it will change her opinion about him. His parents reassure them she's smart enough to not think differently of him. Over the next few days, Clark tries to confront Lois and asks her out, but she's always busy trying to get the latest scoop. Elsewhere, Lex and Mercy get to work and he manages to rebuild Brainiac using the chip he had stolen. He activates the chip and Brainiac comes to life. Lex proposes a new plan and tells Brainiac that the two of them can work together to help each other. Killing Superman will get rid of a powerful enemy for Brainiac so that he can take over another planet, while Lex can take over Earth and be the only person to save their planet. When Brainiac agrees, Lex installs the chip into a newer version of Lex 9000 and installs a Kryptonite stone in it. The stone is the only weakness that Superman has. He then installs a vial of Superman's DNA into the satellite as well. As he launches Lex 9000, it goes into space and Brainiac takes a new form. Just as a researcher informs Lex that they have lost control of Lex 9000, he claims that it is time. Back at the Daily Planet, Perry tells Lois and Clark that they need to go to a restaurant as critics. The two of them reluctantly agree and go to the restaurant. As they're eating, Clark decides to confess his feelings to Lois after she tells him that life is too short to not tell people that you love them. Before he can say anything though, Brainiac calls out to him. He attacks the restaurant that the two of them are sitting in. Clark changes into his Superman suit and attacks back. He's taken by surprise when Brainiac fires a Kryptonite beam at him. Weakened by the Kryptonite, he's unable to fight back. However, Lois, who'd been taking pictures of the scene from a rooftop, gets caught in between Brainiac's attack and loses consciousness. Seeing Lois hurt, Superman attacks Brainiac and manages to take him down. He picks Lois up and finds that her blood is mutating. He takes her to the hospital and decides to avenge her. He steals her blood samples and rushes to his hideout, where he's welcomed into the Fortress of Solitude. He's informed that Lois is suffering from a highly concentrated form of blood alloy fusion that is weakening him as well. He's then told that the only thing that will cure her is a substance in the Phantom Zone, which is a prison for all the criminals in the galaxies. He's warned of the dangers lurking in the Phantom Zone. Superman is willing to do anything to take down. The substance is called Argonium-44 and will help both Lois and Superman. All of a sudden, Brainiac attacks the fortress and tries to steal all of the data of the Kryptonian people. However, Superman sets the system to self-destruct. Brainiac then attacks Superman, and when he cannot detect his DNA signature anymore, he thinks that Superman is dead. Meanwhile, Superman travels to the Phantom Zone where he takes down a criminal creature. At LexCorp, Lex celebrates Superman's death and decides to throw a party. At the same time, Superman manages to find Argonium-44 and uses it to restore his powers. Then he collects a small amount and gives it to Lois, restoring her strength as well. When Lois wakes up, she recognizes that Superman is Clark. At LexCorp's party, Lex announces that he will make sure that LexCorp's resources will be used to help the public. Suddenly, Brainiac attacks the party and announces that Metropolis is going to be controlled by him. Lex tells everyone that he is now going to use his technology to take down Brainiac and keep them safe. Jimmy, who'd been sent by Perry to Lex's party, notices all of the reporters rushing downtown, where Lex had asked to meet them. He tells himself to think like Lois and decides to follow Lex and Mercy inside LexCorp. He hides behind them and overhears Lex telling Mercy about the fact that he's controlling Brainiac. He begins taking pictures, trying to find proof that the two of them are working together. Back at the hospital, Superman exits the building with Lois, who begins flirting with him. He suddenly realizes that he's hallucinating in the Phantom Zone. He manages to break out of the hallucination and makes his way back to Earth. Lex, who'd been fighting Brainiac, realizes that Brainiac was not going to hand over control of the planet and presses the self-destruct button for Lex 9000. However, Brainiac tells him that he had used his intelligence to override the mechanism. Inside LexCorp, Mercy discovers Jimmy and asks him to hand over his camera to her. He refuses to give up the scoop and tries to run, but Mercy attacks him. She ruthlessly beats him up just as the camera slips out of his hands. Then she picks up the camera to inspect it and begins mocking Jimmy. When she looks up, she finds that he's missing. Jimmy had gotten inside one of Lex's robots and uses it to knock Mercy out. As soon as Superman makes it back to the scene, he attacks Brainiac. A furious battle ensues between the two of them, but this time Superman's able to hold his front. When he gets distracted saving a train that had gone off the tracks due to the destruction Brainiac had caused, Brainiac goes into a laboratory. He starts collecting data to power up. Superman flies to the lab and attacks Brainiac. He attaches one of Brainiac's arms to an electrical wire and weakens Brainiac. Superman then goes to the hospital and is about to give Lois the antidote when Brainiac smashes the container. Superman flies back to Lois's room and finds that Lois is dead. He picks her body up and kisses her, transferring the power of Argonium-44 to her. When Lois wakes up, she asks if he is Clark, but he tells her that he's only Superman. Superman then goes back to the Fortress of Solitude and decides to keep Lois safe. He's going to retire from the Daily Planet. Meanwhile, in the Metropolis, Lex is surrounded by reporters and the police. The reporters tell him that a Kryptonian stone was found inside Brainiac with LexCorp's logo on it. Finding himself cornered, Lex orders Mercy to call his attorneys. Meanwhile, Lois and Perry visit an injured Jimmy at the hospital. As they head out of his room, Clark Kent meets Lois outside of the hospital and hands her a bouquet of flowers. He then tries telling Perry that he wants to quit his job at the Daily Planet just as someone calls him with a new scoop. Lois gets out of her wheelchair and rushes to the scene, once again wanting to be the first one to report it. Clark deciding that Lois will get into trouble, with or without him, and decides to stay. The end. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next episode.